I got home from a long day at work, and there it was, an envelope sitting right on our bed, folded up all neat with my wife's fancy handwriting scrawled across the top. It said, "Bedroom Rules." I just stood there, staring at it for a good minute, trying to figure out if this was some weird prank or maybe her idea of spicing things up with a little roleplay. But when I tore it open, my confusion flipped straight to shock. Right at the top, in big, bold letters, it declared, "Effective immediately." Below that was a list, numbered 1 through 15, laying out rules for every single detail of our personal life. First rule, we're only getting close on Tuesdays and Saturdays, strictly between 9 o'clock and 10:30 at night. Second rule, no spur-of-the-moment stuff unless I give her 3 hours notice in writing. Third rule, only 3 specific positions are allowed, no exceptions. The list kept going, covering everything from how long things should last to mandatory showers beforehand, and even dictating the exact words I'm permitted to use. 5 years of marriage, and now I've gotta have a signed permission slip just to hold my own wife. I plopped down on the edge of the bed, skimming through this crazy set of demands one more time. Rule 11 jumped out at me like a sore thumb: performance will be reviewed weekly with feedback forms. I mean, come on, was this really the same woman who used to drag me into closets for a quick laugh during family get-togethers just a couple of years back? Then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, her car pulling into the driveway. Instead of marching out to confront her right then and there, I tucked the list into my pocket for safekeeping. At dinner, she kept shooting me these looks, like she was waiting for me to bring it up. I played dumb, chatting about my day at work and asking how hers went, acting like everything was just peachy. Her fingers tapped restlessly on her water glass, betraying her nerves. Finally, after half an hour of beating around the bush, she couldn't hold back anymore and blurted out, "So, did you find what I left for you?" "You mean that list of rules?" "Yeah, I saw it." Her eyes tightened a bit when I called it that. "They're not rules," she corrected me, "they're boundaries." This wasn't the first time lately she's tried to pull something like this. Just last month, she went through my closet, tossing out shirts and jeans she didn't approve of. Then, a couple of weeks ago, she put a tracking app on my phone, claiming it was, for safety reasons. Each time, I've pushed back, keeping my cool but making it clear I'm not a pushover. But this? This was a whole new level, something I couldn't just let slide. "Where's this even coming from?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Most married folks don't need a rulebook for stuff like this." She sat up straighter in her chair, like she'd rehearsed this. "My friend Heather says having clear guidelines is crucial for a modern relationship. Plus, I read online that most issues in marriages come from not being on the same page about expectations." Heather, of course. That recently divorced friend of hers who's been planting all sorts of nonsense in her head since her split. The same woman who told my wife that her ex-husband's biggest mistake was letting her have too much independence. "I've put a lot of thought into us," my wife went on, her tone sounding like she was reading from a script. "These guidelines will give us structure and boost our satisfaction metrics." Satisfaction metrics? Who the heck talks about their marriage like it's some kind of corporate review? That wasn't my wife talking, that was someone else's words spilling out of her. "Got it," I said simply, and went back to eating my dinner. My calm response clearly threw her off. She was expecting a fight, or maybe for me to haggle, or just roll over and agree. But I didn't give her any of that. Later that night, when she tried to bring up the list again, I just told her I needed some time to think it over and headed to the guest room to crash. The next morning, I slipped out for work before she even woke up. All day, my phone kept buzzing with her texts, each one sounding more worried, asking what I thought of her new system. I shot back that we'd talk about it properly when I got home that evening. Meanwhile, I was mulling over how to handle this, not just this ridiculous list, but the bigger pattern of control that's been creeping into our marriage bit by bit. What my wife didn't know was that her little list of rules pushed me to face something I'd been dodging for months now. Our relationship had taken a serious turn, and not in a good way. The woman who used to thrive on spontaneity and mutual respect was now trying to manage our most personal moments like some kind of corporate policy. By the time I was driving home that evening, I'd hashed out my response in my head, a straightforward, no-nonsense answer that would either fix our marriage or bring it to an end. Either way, I wasn't about to live under a set of bedroom laws and permission forms. It was time to either get back to the respect that built our relationship in the first place or just walk away for good. Looking back on it now, I should have seen this storm brewing from a mile away. These control issues didn't just pop up out of nowhere, they snuck in slow and steady, like weeds creeping up a fence until one day you notice your whole yard's overrun. When we first got married, everything between us felt fair and equal. We'd talk things out, meet each other halfway, and our intimate life was natural and satisfying. But about 2 years ago, things started shifting in small ways. She'd toss out little remarks about my decisions, nothing big at first, just casual hints about what I wore, who I hung out with, or how I spent my downtime. I can still recall the first real red flag. I'd set up a weekend fishing trip with my old college pals, something I'd done every year for ages. 3 days before I was supposed to head out, she suddenly forgot about it and booked a dinner with her boss for the same weekend. When I reminded her I'd already made plans, she didn't blow up or anything. Instead, she got all teary-eyed, saying she felt left behind and worried her career might take a hit if she showed up to the dinner solo. Wanting to be there for her, I called off my trip. Afterward, she was all over me with thanks and affection, making me feel like the best husband in the world. It felt nice to be needed like that, but I didn't see I was setting up a pattern that would creep into every corner of our lives. From there, her requests just kept piling up. She asked me to switch my gym hours because she didn't like being alone at home in the evenings. She started questioning why I needed to grab drinks with buddies after work when we could just hang out together instead. Then she got on my case about what I ate, swapping out stuff in our kitchen for healthier options she picked out herself. Each little change seemed fair enough on its own. Every time I gave in, she'd reward me with a burst of approval or affection, at least for a little while. But the bar kept getting raised. That approval started feeling more like a temporary pass, and the affection dried up bit by bit. Our intimate life went down the same rocky path. What started as her sharing preferences, like, "I love it when we do this," turned into quiet jabs, like, "Why do you always have to do that?" Before long, those jabs became straight-up orders. "From now on, we're only doing it this way." Every time I went along with it, her demands got more audacious. About 6 months back, she shut down any kind of spontaneity altogether. Any physical closeness had to stick to her carefully planned script. If I strayed even a little, I'd get sighs, complaints, or she'd suddenly not be in the mood. The joy and bond that should have been there between us got replaced by stress and the constant feeling of walking on thin ice. The night before she dropped her infamous rulebook on me, we had another moment that laid it all bare. I came up to her while she was reading in bed, nothing pushy, just a gentle kiss on her shoulder. She flinched away like I'd done something gross. "I can't just flip a switch and be ready without warning," she snapped at me. "There's a right time and place, and this ain't it." When I asked when the right time might be, she just shot back, "I'll let you know when I'm ready." The ice in her tone hit me hard. Intimacy wasn't a connection anymore, it was something she held the reins on, doling it out as a prize or keeping it back as a penalty. That I went to bed that night feeling uneasy, but I still wasn't ready for the official list of rules that showed up the next day. Looking back, that list wasn't some brand new bombshell, it was just putting into writing the unspoken guidelines she'd already been enforcing. What really got under my skin wasn't so much the rules themselves, even though they were absurd. It was what they stood for, the total breakdown of mutual respect in our marriage. I'd somehow turned into a follower in my own relationship, expected to obey orders instead of being an equal teammate. That evening, after our short chat over dinner, I headed to my home office while she parked herself in front of the TV. I flipped open my laptop and started digging into something I'd been suspecting for a while, that my wife's changes might go deeper than just her friendship with Heather. Sure enough, Her browser history turned up a bunch of self-help books with titles that screamed red flags, like Power Dynamics in Marriage and How to Train Your Husband. I also stumbled on an online forum she'd joined, where women swapped tips on taming their partners. My gut churned as I scrolled through posts she'd liked about crushing his independence and taking control in the bedroom. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone who'd been slowly brainwashed into seeing our marriage as a battlefield instead of a partnership. Now I had a tough call to make, either give in to this twisted new normal or take a firm stand to either save our relationship or walk away with my self-respect still intact. That night, I crashed in the guest room again, telling her I needed some space to wrap my head around her new rules. She seemed thrown off by how calm I was, probably expecting me to either cave right away or blow up in anger. My steady reaction left her on edge and a bit nervous, something I hadn't planned on, but I wasn't complaining about the upper hand it gave me. The next morning was Saturday. I got out of the house early, saying I needed to clear my mind. Truth is, I had a game plan. If I was gonna tackle this mess head-on, I needed more insight into what was pushing her to act this way. I met up with our old mutual friend, Brian, at a coffee shop on the other side of town. His wife and mine used to be tight for years before Heather came into the picture. But over the last few months, they drifted apart as my wife got sucked deeper into her new circle of friends. She's like a different person, Brian told me after I laid out the whole situation. My wife tried reaching out to her last month after she made some weird comments about training you right. Heather was right there, cutting in every other word, preaching about how women gotta take back their power in relationships. Brian's words lined up with what I'd been thinking. This wasn't just about some bedroom rules, my wife had been steadily nudged into seeing our marriage as a contest she had to dominate. Heather's divorce really did a number on her, Brian added. From what I've heard, she's convinced it fell apart because she gave her husband too much leeway. Now she's dead set on making sure other wives don't make the same so-called mistake. That shed light on this sudden obsession with control. My wife wasn't just making up random rules, she was working off a script from someone whose own marriage had crashed and burned, trying desperately to dodge the same fate in all the wrong ways. I thanked Brian for the insight and headed out with a clearer picture in my head. On the drive back home, I started piecing together my next move. Going straight at her with a confrontation would just make her defensive. Trying to haggle over the rules would mean I'm okay with them existing in the first place. Playing along in some passive-aggressive way would only hurt us both in the long run. Nah, this called for a calculated approach that got to the heart of the problem, the basic respect and equality our marriage was supposed to stand on. When I pulled up to the house, my wife was in the kitchen whipping up lunch, her movements stiff and purposeful. She'd blown up my phone with 3 texts while I was out, each one more insistent than the last about needing to lock down our agreement. The second I walked in, she hit me with, "We've got to talk about the rules." "We'll get to that," I told her with a nod. "But first, how about I take you out for a nice dinner tonight, someplace real special?" She looked caught off guard but kinda pleased. "So, you're ready to go over the terms?" "I'm ready to have a serious talk about our marriage," I answered, keeping my tone even. "For now, though, let's take a breather. Why don't you treat yourself to a massage this afternoon?" "It's on me." The out-of-the-blue offer threw her for a loop, easing her suspicions. She agreed, probably figuring I was about to roll over and give in. Once she headed out to the spa, I got to work on my response, not out of anger or rushing things, but really thinking through what I wanted for our marriage. I spent the afternoon flipping through our old wedding pictures, rereading anniversary cards we'd written to each other, and just thinking back to the times when things felt right between us. I wasn't ready to throw away 5 years of marriage, but I sure as heck wasn't gonna trade my dignity to keep it together either. That evening, I booked a table at the fancy restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I put on a sharp outfit, drove us over in a quiet, easy silence, and made sure we got a secluded spot in the corner where no one could eavesdrop on our talk. After we ordered, my wife set a little notebook on the table, likely planning to jot down any compromises or counteroffers I might toss out about her rules. Seeing that notebook just hardened my determination. Before we dive into your list, I started, keeping my voice steady, I've got a question. What exactly are you hoping these rules will do for our marriage? She seemed like she'd rehearsed for this. They're about structure and clear communication. Marriages fall apart when people aren't on the same page. I'm stepping up to set guidelines that'll help us both. Alright, I said. And are you planning to stick to a similar set of rules for yourself? That threw her off balance. These rules are about how you act, not me. Got it. So, this isn't about shared expectations, it's about managing my behavior specifically. Her eyes tightened a bit. It's about setting up healthy boundaries. Boundaries are something we figure out together, I pushed back. What you've put together is a one-sided list of demands. I could see the irritation starting to bubble up on her face. She hadn't expected me to question the whole idea behind the rules instead of just the details. So, are you gonna go along with them or not? She finally asked, cutting to the chase. I've got my answer ready, I told her, reaching into my jacket pocket. But first, I want you to know I still remember the woman I married, someone who believed in being true partners, respecting each other, and sharing a real bond. I hope she remembers that too. I slid a sealed envelope across the table toward her. She glanced at it, then back at me, a flicker of doubt crossing her expression. Go ahead, open it, I said. Inside is my one clear response to your 15 rules. She reached for the envelope with a hint of hesitation, her fingers shaking just a little. I held her gaze, keeping my face calm and unreadable. Inside was a single piece of paper, not some counterlist or attempt to negotiate her rules, but something completely different. It was a preliminary divorce agreement, already filled out with our basic info. Not filed, not finalized, but detailed enough to show I meant business. The color drained from her face as she realized what she was holding. What is this? She whispered, even though it was pretty darn obvious. My answer, I said, cool as a cucumber. You gave me 15 rules that completely change what our relationship is. This is my counter, one straightforward choice. She kept her eyes glued to the document, then flicked them back up to me, the shock written all over her face. You're really filing for divorce just because I laid out some boundaries? Nah, that's not it, I set her straight. I'm showing you what happens when one of us decides to call all the shots in our marriage without a discussion. What you handed me wasn't boundaries, it was a set of orders that turned our partnership into a lopsided power game where you're the boss of even our most personal moments. Her hands started shaking more noticeably. I figured you'd just talk through the rules or throw out some tweaks. That would have meant I'm okay with the idea that you've got the right to slap rules on me like that in the first place, I cut in. I'm not buying into that idea at all. Our food showed up right then, making for an uncomfortable break as the waiter dropped off our plates and left. Neither of us touched a bite. This is way over the top, she said, her voice getting a little louder. Every marriage has its own rules and things you expect from each other. Sure, I get that, but good marriages build those expectations as a team, with respect and care for both sides. What you did was write up a contract that treats me like some underling who needs to be managed, not a husband who deserves to be valued. I took a quick sip of water before going on. Let me ask you something straight up. Where'd these exact rules even come from? Did you come up with them based on what you need, or are you just copying someone else's playbook for how to keep your husband in line? The way she suddenly dodged my gaze told me everything I needed to know. Heather gave me some ideas for them, she admitted after a pause, but I put in some of my own too. And what about the books and online groups, the ones talking about taking control and crushing a man's independence? Her eyes popped wide, clearly stunned that I knew about that stuff. Yeah, I checked your browser history, just like you've gone through my phone, my emails, my clothes, and now apparently want to dictate my body and our intimacy, I said, keeping my tone level. Difference is, I did it to figure out why the woman I married turned into someone I can't even recognize anymore. She dropped her gaze back to the divorce papers, the weight of it all starting to hit her. You can't seriously mean this. 5 years together, and you just toss it all because of a list. That's the exact question I've got for you, I shot back. Are you ready to ditch our marriage over this need to have me under your thumb? 'Cause that's what this list boils down to, the end of fairness and respect between us. I leaned in just a bit. The woman I said I do to believed in us being partners. We figured stuff out side by side. We gave each other space to be ourselves. Our intimate life came from wanting each other, connecting for real, not some timed routine with feedback forms. I saw something change in her face right then, the first little break in that wall of confidence she'd been hiding behind. For just a second, I caught a glimpse of the woman I married, staring back at me with a mix of confusion and worry. What do you even want from me? She asked at last, her voice quieter now. I want my wife back, I told her plain and simple. Not this new version who sees marriage as some kind of tug-of-war. I want the woman who treated us like equals, who didn't need to micromanage every move I make to feel safe. I nodded toward the divorce papers. Those aren't filed yet. Whether they ever get filed is up to what you do next. But let me be crystal clear, I'm not living by your rules. I'm not gonna be graded, scheduled, or controlled in my own marriage. We either rebuild what we had on mutual respect, or we don't have anything left to rebuild. She kept staring at the papers for what felt like forever. When she finally looked up at me, I could see tears welling up in her eyes. I don't want a divorce, she whispered. Then you've got a choice to make, I said, my voice soft but steady. You can have a husband who's your equal, or you can stick with these rules. But you can't have it both ways. I reached across the table, not grabbing her hand but leaving mine open as an offer. It's up to you, but think hard about it, because this right here is gonna shape whether we've got a future together or not. All around us, the restaurant kept up its quiet buzz, other couples laughing and eating, completely clueless about the life-changing conversation happening at our little table. My wife's eyes darted between my open hand and the divorce papers, the heaviness of her decision pressing down on her. The tears that had been building finally broke free, sliding down her cheeks without her bothering to brush them away. For almost a full minute, she sat there like a statue, staring at the papers as if they might somehow turn into something less serious. Then, with shaky fingers, she grabbed the document and ripped it in half, then into smaller bits, tearing until it was just a pile of useless scraps. I don't want this, she said, her voice cracking. I can't lose you. I kept my cool, even though a wave of emotion hit me hard. Ripping up that paper doesn't fix what's wrong. I can print another one just like it if nothing changes between us. She shoved the torn pieces to the side and reached for my hand, still waiting there on the table. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't see what I was doing to us. I think you did, at least on some level, I said, not harsh, but firm. You made choices on purpose. What I need to figure out is why. What made you think controlling me was the only way to keep our marriage from falling apart? She pulled her hand back and looked off to the side, a mix of shame and sadness crossing her face. The restaurant's background noise, quiet chatter and the clink of glasses, felt almost surreal against the raw, personal moment we were stuck in. It started with Heather, she finally confessed. After her divorce, she wouldn't stop saying she messed up by giving her husband too much freedom, that guys need strict limits and control, or they'll end up walking out or cheating. And you bought into that? I asked. Even after 5 years of proof in our own marriage that I'm not like that. Not right away, she admitted. But she was so sure of herself, so dead set on it. Then she brought me into her support group, other women who swore by this way of thinking. They all had these stories about how taking charge had saved their relationships. Except Heather's own marriage ended in divorce, I pointed out. She claims that's because she started using these tactics too late to turn things around. She stared down at her untouched plate. I know how crazy it sounds now, saying it out loud to you. But when you're stuck in that bubble, hearing the same stuff over and over from a bunch of people, it starts to seem like it makes some kind of warped sense. I looked at her closely, searching for traces of the wife I used to know. And the online groups, those books about crushing a man's independence. Her cheeks flushed red. Heather's group pushed me toward them. They've got this whole idea that marriages today fall apart because women have given up their natural power at home. They're convinced that taking back control, especially over intimate stuff, is the key to fixing everything. So, those bedroom rules weren't even really about us being close, I said. They were just about power. She gave a tiny nod, barely noticeable. The leader of the group says that controlling physical intimacy is the quickest way to set up dominance in a marriage. She swears that once a husband agrees to the first batch of restrictions, he stops pushing back on other kinds of control pretty fast. The cold, calculated intent behind it all slammed into me like a punch to the gut. So, you were basically training me like some kind of pet. New tears pooled in her eyes. When you say it like that. There's no other way to say it, I cut in, my tone sharper than I meant it to be. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You were intentionally trying to manipulate me, following some step-by-step plan to strip away my say in our own relationship. She buried her face in her hands. I was terrified, she mumbled through her fingers. Heather and the others kept drilling into me that if I didn't take the reins, I'd end up alone like they were. They made it sound like a sure thing, that every guy eventually walks out or strays unless he's kept in check. And what proof did they even have for that idea? I pressed. Other than their own broken relationships, they had success stories, she said faintly, clearly realizing how flimsy it sounded. Women who swore these methods saved their marriages. Did you ever meet any of these women? Talk to their husbands to see if they felt the same way. She shook her head no. So, you were ready to tear down everything we've built based on random internet strangers and a divorced friend who's obviously dealing with her own baggage? She dropped her hands, her makeup smudged from crying. Hearing you put it that way, it sounds absurd. It is absurd, I agreed. But it's also incredibly painful. You didn't have enough faith in us, in me, to push back against this poisonous advice. I messed up, she whispered, reaching for my hand again. This time, I let her hold it. I got swept up in fear and terrible guidance. But this isn't who I am. You know that, don't you? The woman you married wouldn't have pulled this. I looked at her hard, trying to gauge if she meant it or if this was just more fallout from the control scheme she'd been running. The real question is whether that woman is still in there, or if she's been overtaken by someone who sees me as an enemy to be managed instead of a partner to be respected. She gripped my hand tight, almost frantic. She's still here. I'm still here. Please, she begged, tell me how we can make this right. I pulled my hand back, gentle but firm. That depends on what making it right means to you. If you're just looking for the smallest thing you can do to dodge a divorce while keeping up the same old patterns underneath, then we've got nothing to talk about. No, she said, shaking her head hard. I want us back. The real us, the way we used to be. Then we've got a lot of ground to cover, I told her. And it starts with that list of yours. We didn't bother finishing our dinner that night. Instead, we settled the bill and drove home, wrapped in a heavy, thoughtful silence. As soon as we stepped inside, my wife headed straight to our bedroom and came back with her list of rules, her hands still shaking a little. What should I do with this? She asked, standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost and unsure. Whatever you decide should come from you, I said, settling onto the couch. Not from me, not from Heather, not from some online group. What do you truly think is best for our marriage? She stared down at the paper, then lifted her eyes to meet mine. Without a second thought, she started tearing it apart, not with the frantic energy she'd used on the divorce papers back at the restaurant, but with slow, purposeful motions. When she was done, she let the shreds drop into our fireplace. I want to burn it, she said. I want to see it gone for good. I gave a small nod and passed her the matchbox from the mantel. She lit a match and tossed it onto the torn bits, watching as the flames ate up the proof of her misguided power play. That's a first step, I said as the last scraps turned black and crumbled. But burning paper is the easy part. Rebuilding trust? That's gonna take a whole lot more. She settled down next to me on the couch, keeping a polite space between us. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. First off, I need the whole picture, I told her. How far does this go? What else in our life together has been shaped by this way of thinking? Over the next 3 hours, she laid it all out, stuff I hadn't even picked up on, sneaky ways she'd been trying to steer things beyond just that obvious list. She'd been quietly deleting messages from my guy friends on social media. She'd accidentally shrunk some of my favorite shirts in the laundry. She even admitted to calling my boss once, pretending to be a doctor's office, just to get me out of a work trip. Every confession hit like a jab, but I kept my cool. This wasn't about getting even or pointing fingers, it was about getting everything out in the open so we could start fresh. What about Heather and that group of hers? I asked when she'd spilled it all. I'll cut them off completely, she said without a second thought. I already deleted my account on that forum while you were in the restroom at the restaurant. I felt so ashamed seeing the look on your face when you talked about what I'd been doing. And how do I know this isn't just a temporary backpedal? A quick way to win back my trust before you slide into a sneakier version of the same game plan. It was a tough thing to ask, but I had to put it out there. She winced, but held my gaze. You don't, she owned up. Words don't mean much right now. All I can hope is that, over time, what I do will show you I'm serious. After a pause, she added, I've also set up an appointment with a therapist for myself. Not couples counseling just yet. I need to dig into why I let myself get pulled into betraying everything we've built. That caught me off guard. It showed she was starting to see the bigger problem, which I hadn't expected so soon. That's a solid move, I said with a nod. But let me be straight with you, I'm not staying here tonight, and maybe not for a few nights. I need some room to sort through all of this. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Are you walking out on me? Nah, I'm just taking some time to think. There's a big difference. I got up and headed to our bedroom to pack a small bag. She trailed behind but stayed in the doorway, watching quietly as I grabbed what I needed. When are you coming back? She asked as I zipped up the bag. When I'm ready, I answered. Not a moment sooner. And when I do come back, we're gonna set new ground rules together, ones based on respect, not one of us trying to run the show. Before I headed out, I turned to her one last time. One more thing. I want full access to your phone and accounts, the same kind of openness you expected from me. Not because I want to control you, but because trust has to be rebuilt from scratch. Without a word, she handed over her phone. It's unlocked. Everything's accessible. No more hiding anything. The next week felt like laying the first bricks of a new foundation. I booked a hotel room for 3 nights, using the time to really think about what I wanted moving forward. When I finally came back home, we started the long, slow work of putting our relationship back together on better terms. She stuck to her therapy sessions twice a week. She cut ties with Heather, even though that woman tried some slick moves to stay in touch. Most of all, bit by bit, she started turning back into the person I married, considerate, respectful, and treating me like a true partner instead of someone to be managed. 6 months down the line, our marriage is in a better place than it's been in ages. The closeness that had been choked out by rules and schedules has come back, now rooted in real want and honest talks instead of who's got the upper hand. We figure things out as a team. We give each other room to be ourselves while still choosing to shape a life side by side. Just last week, she gave me an envelope that reminded me of the one holding her old notorious rules. But this time, inside was something different, not a bunch of orders, but a list of heartfelt thanks for the ways I've been there for her over the years, along with deep, genuine apologies for losing track of the partnership we'd created. Your one clear answer turned everything around, she wrote at the close. You could have fought control with control or just walked out the door. Instead, you gave me a stark choice that made me face what I was tearing apart. Thank you for standing up for us when I'd forgotten why we were worth the fight. Sometimes, the strongest way to push back against someone trying to box you in isn't with anger or just giving in. It's having the steady confidence to know your own value and not settle for anything less than the respect you've earned. That list of bedroom rules my wife made didn't just vanish that night, it got swapped out for something way more important, a true, renewed promise to the fairness and mutual respect that make a marriage something worth holding on to. Well, that's the end of our story. If you've stuck with me all the way through, how about giving our channel a subscribe? It means a ton to us. I've picked out a couple of other videos I think you'll really like, feel free to check them out by clicking on them. I'll be right here waiting for you in the next tale. Catch you soon.